Welcome back to Radically Rational Radio. In this episode, we're going to go over the fact that the EcoHealth Alliance has had its $2.3 million grant reinstated. Now, even if you do think it is a good idea to send $2.3 million back to that company, even though we're about to hit our debt ceiling, we are overspent in trillions of dollars, we don't even have the money to spend. However, if you do think it's worth spending it, in this episode we're going to cover why that is just not a good idea. Let's jump into it. The Daily Mail is reporting that the EcoHealth Alliance will now receive $2.3 million in U.S. taxpayers' cash to study risky bat coronaviruses that could start the next pandemic. This is really bad. You probably already know EcoHealth Alliance, the New York City-based research group run by British zoologist Peter Daszak, announced today that the research will resume nearly 3 years after it was terminated. Under the terms of the grant, the organization will receive $2.3 million funded by the U.S. taxpayers, evenly spread out over 4 years to work on bat-origin coronavirus. However, EcoHealth Alliance has agreed not to subcontract to China, collect new virus samples from the wild, or carry out gain-of-function research, the intentional alteration of viruses to make them more infectious or deadly. Here we have a picture of Dr. Daszak and Dr. Fauci. They have had a relationship for over a decade now. Now at first, everything seems fine. Look, the pandemic is down. We were doing good research. That research helped us in the process of figuring out the origin of COVID. We need to recommence research. That is a sound theory. However, there's a couple of big problems here. First and foremost, we just can't afford it. We don't have the money. We're overspending, and even $500,000 a year to this company to do this research, it's just not in the books. It's fiscally irresponsible. You probably don't agree with me. We should spend the money. We're wasting money on other things. We're running up debt either way. This should also be spent. Who else should we pay? They've been doing it for years. They're great at doing this. Well, let's cover how much EcoHealth Alliance has helped us during the pandemic. Well, the EcoHealth Alliance was doing research when the outbreak first happened. Let's review how helpful they were during that time. Dr. Richard Ebright, a biologist at Rutgers University and longtime lab leak proponent, told Daily Mail, an organization that potentially shares culpability for the origins of COVID-19 pandemic, continues to receive U.S. government grants and contracts. A report by the Office of the Inspector General published January found that the organization had misused around $89,000 in funding. He also noted the nonprofit could not hand over lab notebooks or other records of research being conducted at the lab when asked by U.S. officials. The violations were flagrant, were repeated, and damaged the U.S. health security and U.S. national security, potentially being casual factors in the origins of COVID and definitely being causal factors in the obstruction of the investigation of the origin of COVID. Now, make a judgment for yourself, whether it was gain-of-function, lethality. If it was COVID-related research, the EcoHealth Alliance was doing it, they were doing it in Wuhan, and we were paying for it. When we needed the notebooks and the documentation to verify that Wuhan lab wasn't part of it, they weren't able to give it. Now, this is more than likely that China would not allow them to, so their hands were tied. EcoHealth Alliance, of the $2.3 million that they're getting, over $1.2 million is going directly to the Wuhan lab. We shouldn't be funding research that we can't get immediate access to regardless. And if the EcoHealth Alliance is still doing the research there, then they shouldn't get that money. Of the $4.3 million, $1.1 million is being distributed to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So where's the rest going? Duke National University of Singapore Medical School, the grant's title, Understanding the Rise of the Bat Coronavirus Emergence. Basically, how can it infect us? With about 25% of the total grant going directly to Wuhan, it's hard not to think that that data isn't going to be suspect with what's now happened in the past. If nothing else, they're going to really hide their tracks and make it look like they're doing a good job. And we're looking for accurate information, not people willing to hide their failures to look good. So the rest of the money is obviously going somewhere out of China. It's going to Singapore, the National University of Singapore Medical School. The reason Dr. Daszak gave for the rest of the money going to Singapore, they've got real expertise in understanding how different viruses can bind to human cells. Their work will investigate hundreds of samples of bat corona collected from Asian countries such as China. These researchers will not go into the field and collect new samples, just work with what already exists in their databases. What we want to know is, could one of the viruses actually infect a human? And they have a way to do that just using computers or simple lab work. This work doesn't create an infectious virus. It just uses proteins from the viruses to see if they'll bite. Nope, we're not creating viruses. We're just mapping them out. Hey guys, let us look at all of the corona information that we've gathered, and we want to dig through it exclusively finding spike proteins with high human infection rate. That information is very dangerous. It's a key to our immune system. With a virus that we are very scared of. Another pandemic will happen if we have a high spread virus. Whether there is a spike protein out there that is more infectious than anything we've seen or not, going and looking for it is a bad idea, because once we know about it, it will be used, and not for good. It's Singapore. It's a country that we have great relations with. Let's take a look at Singapore's relationship with China. I think Google is a pretty non-biased way. If nothing else, it's probably left-leaning. And the seed question I went with is, how much influence does the CCP have over Singapore? Because I think that's really what matters. What is the relationship between China and Singapore? Both sides agree that relations between China and Singapore have continued to grow from strength to strength. Both countries have taken a long-term and strategic perspective in charting the path for developing mutual beneficial bilateral relations. Right now it seems like they're on Team Asia, which they are totally allowed to be. Not if we're funding them millions of dollars and they don't give us the data. I always think a good litmus test for where Singapore stands is on the Taiwan conflict. Singapore consistently maintains a one China policy and opposes independence for Taiwan. We took this fundamental position even before we established diplomatic relationships with PRC. Most recently, PM Ghosh restated it in his address to the IISS conference, or the Shangri-La Dialogue. Now, is Singapore a U.S. ally? Singapore has long-standing military relations with the United States. The United States sells arms to Singapore and provides access to its bases to train Singapore military outside of their small island city-state. We sell weapons to everyone. They're on Team China, and we sell them stuff. They clearly have a transactional relationship with us and a political relationship with China. $4.3 million is being paid for research, and not a single bit of it is on a U.S. server. We have to agree, it is not un-American to say that we should not be putting money outside of our country. Our ambassador in China can't talk to anyone. None of their corporate offices are responding with any of their data. China is actively doing an information war on us, and we want to pay $4.3 million for another government to look and find the most infectious spike protein amongst all the data that we've gathered. Over the last 3 years, they have gathered so much data. That is a lot of money to pay for a lot of research. They are going to find a more infectious one. That's just most likely. And if they don't, they will 100% see the pattern of what is most infectious. But now you're saying to me, well, that's only research. They're not going to do gain of function. Except for in 3 to 4 years, this will all quiet down and they'll start it back up. Except for now, they have the blueprint on how to make one of the most infectious viruses mankind has ever seen. He says explicitly, this work doesn't create an infectious virus. It just uses the proteins from the virus to see if they bite, looking for high infection rate. The doctor said that the recombination virus experiment performed at Wuhan that everybody has been so concerned about will not be performed, and the theory is that they will later. Some have criticized these types of experiments as dangerous gain-of-function research while heavily restricted worldwide. And I agree. My primary argument for not funding this research is it just accelerates identifying something dangerous that we know people can make. We should make that more difficult to find. Do not let them sell you on, we need to find it to find a cure. Make it real difficult to find instead. Let nature bring it to us. We will find a cure quickly. We have the data waiting. He does deny that they ever performed gain of function using EcoLab funds. He has to. However, he said it is the current political situation around the potential lab leak that makes it unwise to continue the research in the short term. We're in a situation where the public really hasn't decided whether those experiments should happen and what the value is and what the risk is. No, I believe the public has 100% decided that it is a bad idea and it's too risky and not worth it. So we're going to, for the next 4 years, not do that type of experiments with these viruses. And I think politically, it's a very charged situation in the U.S., and we felt it was the best way forward to get on with the work. They need a paycheck. They'll say whatever it takes to get that paycheck, and now we're literally going to give them 4 years of money. No one's going to look at them, and they're just going to give China some of the most lethal data. We wouldn't give this chemical warfare information to our closest ally. Yet we're funding a world power that is actively trying to replace us as the number one world power. As an American, you have the right to believe that they can, and you may even argue that they should do it. Can we agree that we shouldn't fund it? At least make it voluntary? The idea that we would allow our country to run up debt to fund our adversaries is incredibly dangerous. Now, on a closing note, everything about this is a bad idea, and I don't even know who we would call to prevent it. The 3 branches of our government are just sticks on the tree of bureaucracy. I don't even know if we could prevent this. When you look at the effects of this decision and you ask, is it strengthening our country or is it weakening our country? It's clear that it's weakening our country. I hope you learned something. I'm Tristan. This is Radically Rational Radio. If you disagree with any of my assumptions or my points, or you think something here is an outright lie, please leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Stay resilient.